Hey guys, welcome back. This video is going to be a little bit different than usual. As you can see, the dungeon is not currently going. Um, that's because I want to go more in depth in this video. Instead of just talking as things are happening, I want to take it really slow and kind of point out like very specific things as they're happening. So I'm going to be pausing, I'm going to be going back, trying to like point out stuff. I'll like highlight stuff with my cursor or whatever and show you. So uh, this is a 15 Mists of Tirna Scithe. To start off, these are the talents I'm running. Death and Madness is pretty much always in basically any key that I run. I think Fortress of the Mind could be good if you had Talbadar's Stratagem and maybe Psychic Link, but I'm not sure if you would ever run Psychic Link in a dungeon like this. So Death and Madness, at least right now, is like the go-to for any key. Body and Soul. Some people like to run Sand Lane. Like I know Public, one of the Warcraft Priests, SimC author guys, he really likes Sand Lane because you get more healing out of Vampiric Embrace or whatever, but I like Body and Soul for the movement option. Intangibility is also good. Really, this row doesn't matter very much at all what you choose, but Body and Soul is, I mean, super nice. I wish they would build Body and Soul straight into Power Word Shield so that you didn't have to take this talent and you could take a different one and still get the movement speed increase. But I guess it makes sense. After that, I'm running Searing Nightmare, Psychic Horror. Again, Psychic Horror is basically a staple for me. I don't Mind Bomb is like never used. I don't think I've ever taken this talent since Legion. And then Last Word, I also rarely use, although this one has some pretty good value. I'll talk more about Searing Nightmare in a second, but basically these three I take almost every single time. Death and Madness, Body and Soul, and Psychic Horror, basically every single dungeon. Um, and then I've got Searing Nightmare, Shadow Crash, Void Torrent this week, and Hungering Void. Hungering Void is also another one that I have been taking almost every single dungeon, just because it's really easy to use and it's hard to get bad value out of it. Surrender to Madness has a really high skill ceiling. Like if you can use it basically perfectly, then you can get a lot of damage out of it, and it would be better than Hungering Void in almost every situation, except for like extended boss fights on Tyrannical or whatever. But even then, yeah, no, Surrender to Madness is just worse on fights like that. But typically, Surrender to Madness in a key has like a lot higher potential than Hungering Void. Then Ancient Madness also has some really high. The best option that I can see for taking Ancient Madness would be like a high fortified key where you pull like all of this stuff and like all of that stuff, like a really big pack like that. Maybe 10 plus targets or something. I could see Ancient Madness being really good. Because you like dot everything up and then pop Void Eruption, so you've got 30% crit from Ancient Madness, and then you hit everything with a Shadow Crash immediately, and it does just tons and tons of damage if you get a crit. Then on top of that, you just start spamming Searing Nightmare, and you do easily 20k DPS or whatever. Reason I'm taking Searing Nightmare over Misery is just a personal choice usually. In something like Mists, especially near the end of the dungeon, there are times where you can get really big pulls going with all those staghorns and gorms and guys down there. It's pretty good. I think Misery could be good as well, but I haven't really loved running Misery in dungeons recently, so let's get into the key. Oh, one more thing I should mention before we keep going. If you look right here, I have a stat shroom already. That's because before the key, this is just a pug, by the way. None of these, I don't run with these people constantly. Before the key, we opened this up and we ran down to the mushrooms, and we got mushrooms, and the buff will last after you put in the key. This is just a little increase that's not very big, that you can have a mushroom for the first whole half before you even start the key, and then once you're in the key, you have the mushroom for the first half, and then you can grab another mushroom and have a 20-minute buff of the stat shroom. So that's if you've got a Night Fae in your group, and it's worth it. But just a little thing right here, our countdown timer goes off, and the shaman who has the key was still repairing and didn't put it in, so I kind of freaked out. Okay, so right here is very simple. We're just gonna open up the little Night Phase skip and then do this Drust Spike Claw pull. This is one of the problems with pugging. If you notice right here, I'm casting Mass Dispel right here. I wish this overlay thing wasn't in the way, but hopefully you can see I'm casting Mass Dispel, but these mobs already have their buff taken off. That's because our DH is a Blood Elf, and because we're in a pug, we didn't communicate who was gonna take off the buff that they have. If you don't know, these guys have a buff on them that when they die, it does like a bunch of damage or something. Um, so he jumps in and he Arcane Torrents them all while I'm Mass Dispelling. So right here, my Mass Dispel does nothing. There's no point in me casting it. Right there, I pop my Dreadfire Vessel and my Shadow Crash immediately. One thing I've been trying to do with Shadow Crash is it, the damage it does is affected by your mastery. Your mastery is just for every damage over time effect you have on an enemy, you do 9% more damage. So technically, if you were to Mind Sear into this, and then Searing Nightmare so everything gets Shadow Word Pain on it, and then Shadow Crash, your Shadow Crash will do 9% more damage to everything. So that's something I've been trying to work on, is not popping Shadow Crash immediately. It's hard though because Shadow Crash gives you that instant burst of some insanity. The other thing I want to mention right there is I do start Mind Searing right after I throw out the Shadow Crash, and the one tick gets me up to 30 insanity, which lets me use Searing Nightmare right there. But the guy I was targeting with Mind Sear jumped to me. He hits me with his dot, and my Searing Nightmare only spreads Shadow Word Pain to 3 mobs instead of all 5. So that's just kind of an unlucky thing. The way I can avoid that is just by standing. If everybody was stacked in melee, these guys wouldn't jump out. They would just jump right on top of themselves, and then I'd hit all 5 immediately with Searing Nightmare. Not a huge thing, but like a small positioning thing that you can do. And then right here, this dot is pretty painful, but because this is, oh, I forgot to mention, this is a tyrannical, inspiring, necrotic week. So these mobs aren't going to do very much damage because it's tyrannical, but it is inspiring, so you got to be pretty careful. And necrotic is kind of wrecking our tank already. The other thing is their dot that they leave is pretty deadly. So right here is kind of scary. I have the dot on me, and I just Shadow Word Deathed this guy, and it did like a lot of damage. If you watch, I'm at 24k HP, and then the Shadow Word Death hits me and it's like 12k, so I just get chunked pretty hard. This is a situation where it would be nice to have my Desperate Prayer, pop Desperate Prayer and then Shadow Word Death, but it's not a huge deal. I get jumped on again, and right there I pop my Desperate Prayer, but it doesn't matter because our healer topped me off. So that's this first pull. Not great. A bunch of little things that could have made it better. But I do manage to get like a lot of insanity going into this next pull. I'm at 91. Right there, we tried to CC this inspired guy so that we could kick all this stuff. Let me stop this real quick. But I think he was blinded, and somebody broke it before. So now he's in the pack, which means we're not going to be able to kick any of this stuff. This guy in the back here is doing Bewildering Pollen, which is that frontal over there that you can barely see. That doesn't really matter. What I did was I popped Power Infusion here, and then I put Vampiric Touch on everything, and then I started spamming Mind Sear and Searing Nightmare. And if you watch, I'm about to cast Shadow Crash, which will do pretty good damage to this pack that's all tight like this. And then I'm going to pop pretty much everything on this pack because we have a decent amount of time before we get to the boss. And the boss is really the next time that I want Power Infusion and Void Eruption both up. So this is a good pack to pop it on, especially because stuff here lives pretty long. So I hit him with the Shadow Crash. I've got Power Infusion running. I should pop Void Eruption. There it goes. And I'm being targeted by this Overgrowth. This is really, really bad timing for me because I'm in my big damage window. Like my Void Form has 14 more seconds on it. My Power Fusion's about to fall off, and I'm about to get stunned by this Overgrowth, which means my potential damage here is going to go way down because I spend our 5.5 seconds at most stunned like this and can't do any damage. So this is unfortunate, um, but pretty unavoidable, I think. I think if you get targeted by this villager, there's nothing you can do as a Shadow Priest that'll make it not target you. So I sit here stunned for a second. Oh, it happened way too quick. Let me go back just a little bit. Um, and if you're not careful, you may not notice what happens here. I'm gonna pop Dispersion here in a second, and because I was hoping that it would break this stun. However, Dispersion doesn't break stuns; it only breaks snares. So I'm pretty low on HP too, so Dispersion here is maybe not a bad idea. Although there's not a lot of damage coming out. But this druid right here that you can barely see is convoking, and he hits me with a Star Surge like right as I press Dispersion. So if you're not paying attention, you might think that Dispersion broke me out because it happens at like the exact same time. But really, he crit me with a Star Surge, and that's how I get out of this. So let me back it up just a little so you can see. So if you just watch me real quick, um, I dot everything. I'm spamming Searing Nightmare. Here comes the Bewildering Pollen thing, the frontal, and then he targets me with Overgrowth. And right here is where it happens. The druid backs up. I get stunned. He hits me with a Star Surge right as I disperse. And the Star Surge is what broke me out, not the Dispersion. And then right here, our tank has to kite because he's got 28 stacks of Necrotic, so I'm basically trying to stay out of frontals and sniping stuff with Shadow Word Death when I can. Our tank is having a hard time kiting because he gets more stacks. I get targeted by Overgrowth again, which is super annoying. But they don't actually manage to break me out. It just I go through the whole thing. Okay, so we kill the villager. So then moving on, we want to skip a lot of this stuff and go get the stash rooms. I always mind soothe that second guy as well, just in case anybody gets too close. You don't have to. You can walk past him without mind soothing. And then you can mind soothe these two on the left and go in immediately, but we end up just pulling these three. This is a really kind of awkward situation because this inspiring guy, we want to keep this inspiring guy CC'd so that we can kick this stuff, but we end up not being able to kick this stuff anyway because this guy on the left didn't move close enough, and we have this solar beam which brought everything over to the left anyway. So now none of this stuff is kickable, and we should just pull in that other guy. But we end up not doing that. So I'm just trying not to dot that other guy so that we don't break the CC, and then you know, Shadow Word Deathing stuff as it's getting close to dying. Not a whole lot here to change. I get hit by that Spirit Bolt, which hurts way bad right when I Shadow Word Death, and that was pretty scary. But yeah, and then we break the CC, and we should have broken this before, but now we have to sit here and fight this guy for however long it takes to kill him, rather than having killed him with the rest of the stuff. I'm void torrenting basically any time that I can. If there's like a decent amount of mobs, say like 5+ in a pack, then I try to hold void torrent unless there's like a priority target. Inspiring is a good reason to take Void Torrent as well, because sometimes you really just need to kill the Inspiring mob as fast as possible, so you're basically just doing single target damage. And Void Torrent is super good for that. So right here I'm focusing Skull, because you don't want these guys to cast Furious Thrashing at the same time. So you focus one down to about 50%, I think it is, and then they cast the Furious Thrash, and then you focus the other guy down to the Furious Thrash and cleave the first guy, and then you can manage those easier. Here I'm trying to save Power Infusion and Void Eruption for the boss, because it's like I said, it's tyrannical, so we're going to want to use all our cooldowns on the boss anyway. And this boss has a burn phase in it where he takes more damage, so I'll probably save my cooldowns for that. This is just the single target rotation. You dot stuff. One thing I want to mention is if you're a Venthyr like I am, try to save your mind games. If you're single target like this, you should only mind games when you have all 3 dots on the target to get the most value out of your mastery. Because like I said before, every dot that you have on the target, that's Vampiric Touch, Devouring Plague, and Shadow Word Pain. If you have all three on the target, you're doing 27% increased damage, and for each of them it's 9%, right? So if you just put Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain on the target and then you hit Mind Games, you'll only do 18% more damage. And if you put all three on there, you'll do 27% more damage, which is more. So try and save that. And usually you can get all three dots up within a pretty short amount of time so that you can put Mind Games on cooldown ASAP. Right here, we want to focus the tree until the tree becomes an ally to us, and then we are going to hard burn the boss. That's why I'm saving my pre-pot, my Power Infusion, and my Void Eruption. Right here, it's pretty nice to have a Shaman for that. They can just Tremor Totem the fear, and then you're out of it. Okay, and then right here, we're going to burst into the Ingra guy. So I'm popping PI, I dot everything. I dot him with everything. Then Void Eruption, and now I'm just blasting. I call for Lust, because I would rather Lust this first phase than the second phase. As you can see, yeah, the Shaman says next one, I thought, meaning the next burn phase. You want to Lust one of the two. I think you get more value out of it on the first one, because everybody saves their cooldowns for the first one anyway. So it lines up easier, and you don't know if everybody's cooldowns are going to be lined up for the second one. So honestly, I think you should just Lust the first one when everybody has their cooldowns, and then just finish him with whatever cooldowns you have left on the second phase. Yeah, so now we're back to phase one. This is pretty simple. Trying to kick those spirit bolts when we can, dodging the blue stuff on the ground. Embrace Darkness means that the main dude takes no damage, or at least like 99% reduced damage, something like that. So there's no point in keeping dots up on him or hitting him with anything because he doesn't take any damage. The only point would be for apparitions to generate insanity. So it's okay to keep Vampiric Touch on him, but Shadow Word Pain, there's no point other than having dots on him for this burn phase. So yeah, then we go into our next burn phase. We pop Lust, but I don't have PI or Void Eruption, so I'm not going to do as much damage. I get a 56k crit right there with my Dreadfire Vessel, which is pretty nice. You want to be careful in this phase using Shadow Word Death, because he's going to take a lot more damage, and it's going to do a lot more damage to you. So I do it after he gets the tree back under his control so that it doesn't kill me. You can probably survive it, and that's a great time to Desperate Prayer and then Shadow Word Death. But other than that, I think I've played this fight pretty well. I end up doing almost 8k DPS, which is not bad, but could be better. But Druid calls for Shroom, and 3 of them go back to get another Mushroom. I'm not entirely sure if that's the right call. I think there's not enough green Shrooms for everybody to go back. Something I did here was I targeted Mistcaller, who's the next boss, and I put a skull on her because you can watch where she's going. We go back just a little bit. You can find the first two, which the first 2 doors are, if you put like a marker on her. So I mark her with a skull, and then she runs right, so I know that it's this right door. And this right door, if she's gonna go, so this right door has a door right here that has doors up here, so I can tell she went through this door. So she's gonna go this way and then that way. So as we do the maze, we can skip these first 2 puzzles because we know that it's just right and then that way. Our Demon Hunter also pulls the pack from inside this room by jumping the wall right here and throwing a glaive over. I'm not entirely sure how they do that. I know our Fire Mage can do it, so I think anybody can do it. But I'm pretty sure you can like get line of sight of that pack just by standing up on this hill and like jumping or something. Yeah, so this pack, just popping Power Infusion and spamming Searing Nightmare basically. I get caught in this Spear Flurry, which is really bad because our tank is kiting for Necrotic. That's something that I should be more aware of, and if we were in voice comms, he could be saying, I'm kiting, and then I would know to watch out. I had a 14k Shadow Word Death right there, which is almost half my HP, so that's pretty scary. I know for a fact that it's this door, so I just walk over there, and then I hesitate, but then I go through anyway, and I was right. In this pack, we've got this Stalker, Stalkers are the most deadly usually, but since it's not fortified, it's not a huge deal. I put Vampiric Touch on everything right there, and then I put my Shadow Crash out just to do 9% more damage, like I said before. And then I'm just I'm focusing the Stalker right now with Void Torrent. I want to get as many uses of it as possible. Although you could be just spamming Searing Nightmare here, that would also do pretty good damage. Um, but I guess it is pretty important to get that Stalker down quick, uh, and you want to get as much value out of Void Torrent as you can. When we get down to 2 mobs like this in the poll, I switch from doing Searing Nightmare to just doing uh, my regular single target rotation, basically. Okay, then we move on to this Matriarch, and if I remember right, I played this Matriarch pretty badly. So let's see how I do. I put my dots on everything. Right now I should be popping Power Infusion and Void Eruption, because both are up. And we have a little bit before the boss. I dodged that Radiant Breath, which is good. I Void Torrent, that's okay. I get all 3 dots up now. I'm doing the puzzle, because I'm in a pug, and when I'm in pugs I try to not just rely on other people to do the puzzle. I find the spot, and I don't get my use out of my Power Infusion and Void Eruption there. So this whole fight, I could have just waited, popped PI, popped VE or Void Eruption, and done more than 3k damage, something like 5k. But instead, I ran around doing the puzzle, and that's probably the wrong call in this situation. Especially if you're in a coordinated group, um, you should let the healer do it. Especially on like a single target like this, where there's not a ton of damage going out. The only person to be worried about right now is the tank, so I have nothing to worry about, especially with this pool. This dragon guy puts a radiant pool on the ground, and it heals whatever is standing in it. So even if I am taking damage, I can just stand in that pool and get passive healing. Um, but instead, I decided to run around and do the puzzle, and it costs me a bunch of damage. And same with the druid. The druid also ran around helping with the puzzle, and is also doing about 3k damage. We're barely above the tank and the healer. So this was a bad call on my part, and I lose a void form and a power infusion window. So not very good. And then on top of it, I barely dodged this frontal, but the next frontal I get hit by, so that's also not good. Um, yeah, so we're finishing off this guy. Yeah, and then this frontal, the boss had. Let me go back real quick. The boss had. Um, so I Shadow Word Death here. Mind Blast. Okay, the boss is sub 50k HP. Boss gets down to 12k HP, and I'm trying to run out of the frontal now. I was pretty sure I wasn't okay. So first off, I wasn't sure what the range on this frontal was. Like maybe if I ran all the way against this door, the boss is far enough away that this frontal won't hit me. And then on top of that, the boss is, I guess it's not a boss, but this ad is almost dead. So if I had just sat there and done damage, there's a chance that we would have killed it before this breath finished. But I get the worst of both worlds, and the frontal, which is going this direction, uh, maybe it's more like this direction, it hits me, and does a lot of damage. In a high enough fortified key, that's a one shot and I'm dead. Just because I didn't position better, and I took a risky play. So we move on to a manifestation of pride. I put my camera basically straight down to try and get a better view, because there's like leaves and branches and crap in the way, which is probably my biggest complaint about Shadowlands so far. There's a lot of dungeons that just have absolutely horrible camera angles in them. Like the end of Spires of Ascension is one that comes to mind. There's like no way to not get angel ankles in your face. Um, so on the Manifestation of Pride, obviously it's just single target. Then we move on to this next pack. It's got a Stalker in it and a Stinger. Stalker is pretty deadly. The Stinger is also... Oh, let me mention one thing I did there. I popped Void Eruption before I threw out my Shadow Crash. Void Eruption gives you maximum value out of your mastery without having your dots on everything. So I had Vampiric Touch on everything, and then I popped Void Eruption and immediately Shadow Crashed. Um, Even though I don't have Shadow Word Pain or Devouring Plague on everything, I'm still gonna get 27% increased damage from my Shadow Crash because of the fact that I'm in Void form. So that's a way to get around dotting everything. I use my Dreadfire Vessel here too to do more damage. 12k, and it's not even a crit. Okay, and then I'm just, there's three, now there's just two. I was just putting Searing Nightmare, and as you can see at the end of that pull, I did 13.5k damage. So that's a pretty good example of how you should handle a pull like that typically. Um, I don't know if there's much I could have done better than that, and I don't mean to just like toot my own horn. I'm trying to see if there's, yeah, I think that's, and our Outlaw Rogue also did 12.5k, so maybe without the Outlaw Rogue's damage, I would have had more time to do more stuff to the pack, but that was pretty good for burst AoE. Um, Vampiric Touch on everything, Void Eruption, Shadow Crash, and then Searing Nightmare spam. Right here we have a Stalker. Oh, before we go on, I was going to mention in that last pull, we had a Stinger, and the Stinger targets a random player and will put a really nasty dot on them. That's why I mentioned that there was a Stinger in that pull. Uh, it's a magic debuff, which is something that you can mass dispel. So keep that in mind. If there are like multiple Stingers in the pack or something, you can mass dispel the dots off people, and that's really important on like a fortified week, especially if your healer is having a hard time. So right here, I'm Mind Searing. I have 100 Insanity, so and I'm already pressing the button. I'm gonna cast Searing Nightmare on everything right here. Um, it would be a good idea. There's 5 mobs in this pack. It'd be a good idea to put Vampiric Touch on at least a couple of them. Just like the more important ones, especially like this Inspiring guy, let's say. Maybe this Inspiring guy and this Shaper would be the best idea. Um, because they'll live longer, they've got more HP, and by having my Vampiric Touch on the two of them, they'll also take 9% more damage than the other ones. So I pop Searing Nightmare. Um, I do end up putting Vampiric Touch on those two that I mentioned, which is good, and one other. Right there, we get one of the casts goes off because we have Inspiring, which means we can't stop anything. And now 3 people are entangled. It looks like this is a magic debuff. This is how my frames pop up if it's something I can dispel. So a mass dispel here might not hurt, but also we're pretty far into this pull already. Everything's at like 50% HP, so it's not a huge deal. The ideal move here would probably be 2 Devouring Plagues into this guy and then Void Torrent, because he's the Inspiring mob and they've got some pretty bad things that we need to stop. But I may have chose to just pad. It's just kind of pad because obviously everything needs to die in here anyway, but uh, the best move here probably is, yeah, just single target this Inspiring guy down and then worry about the other stuff. Let's see what I do. I pop Mind Games, I Devouring Plague twice. Yeah, and it looks like I made the right choice, Void Torrent. But, unfortunately, this is one of the problems that Inspiring can make happen. One of these guys was casting an AoE heal, and it gets off because we can't kick it because of Inspiring, right? So if I had focused this guy from the start, there's a chance that this heal wouldn't have gotten off because we could have kicked it by now. This guy would have been dead if we had all single targeted it. It's this Nourish the Forest thing. That guy casts Nourish the Forest. All these things get this buff on it. It is a magic buff, so if I had been paying more attention, you can dispel magic and just get rid of it and then continue killing this guy, or even mass dispel everything. But I don't, and this guy heals a lot. That's something that maybe I should make more visible on my frames because I honestly didn't notice. And now all 4 of these guys are at 100% HP, and we decide to separate them. So our druid rooted this guy, and then our rogue stopped him out here, and so now they're separated so that we can kick this stuff. And now we are also, this thing has a skull on it, so we're also all single targeting that basically. So I Searing Nightmare those guys, put Shadow Word Pain on them real quick, and then I stun this guy to keep him out. Our tank was also, it just so happened that our tank was kiting for Necrotic when that happened, which turned out really, really good for us. So then he jumps back in, we finish this guy off, and then we can turn and kill these guys. That's the Nourish the Forest thing that would heal everything back up. We kick it with a Solar Beam or whatever. Right here it'd be good to put Vampiric Touch on some stuff. I put it on everything, it looks like. Then Searing Nightmare and Mind Sear, and then a Shadow Crash. So pretty good. Not the best pull. It would have been good to recognize that we needed to single target that that inspired guy, because this pull ends up taking easily twice as long as it should have. Right there, that's another situation where I wish I had been in voice comms or just paid more attention, because the tank was kiting and this Guardian guy, I'll play it again, this Guardian guy is casting his Bucking Rampage, and when that finishes casting it knocks back everybody in the blue circle that you'll see. So the tank starts kiting towards me, and that Nourish the Forest, I stop that, and then let's see what happens. Yeah, it's this thing. So the tank is about to start kiting. He'll kite down this way. I'm right here. Kind of hard to see because everything's blue. And I need to be outside of this circle or I'm going to get knocked back. So if I had been paying more attention, I would have seen the tank coming this way. I could have gone this way, or honestly just straight to the right to get out of this as fast as possible. A position like over here or over here would have been a lot better than where I am right now. So also the tank could have just kited that way, and then all three of us would have been fine. This isn't the worst position, it just turns out to be the worst position because the tank jumps over this way, and then this guy runs right at me. So this guy comes towards me, bada bing, bada boom. These three red lines are a sign that I'm getting destroyed. Oh, actually, that was my Dreadfire Vessel. Yeah, so this guy bops me real hard and I get knocked back. I notice it at like the very last second and I cast that Power Word Shield on myself. Try and keep myself alive, but I do end up living, so it's not a huge deal. But now I'm like right next to the tank, and so I want to get the crap out of here, and he jumps right on top of me, and then he's basically chasing me. So this is partially just a miscommunication, and also I'll take the blame for it because I should have just paid more attention and stood further away, etc., etc. So right here we're going into a 5-pack. So the ideal situation here would be I have Power Infusion and Void Eruption up, but we're just one room away from the boss. So it probably won't be a full 2 minutes before we're pulling the boss. So I should probably save my cooldowns right here. But if I choose not to, I'll do really good damage in this pack. If there wasn't a boss coming up, then you would want a Power Infusion, Vampiric Touch everything, Void Eruption, actually Power Infusion, and then just immediately Void Eruption, and then Shadow Crash, and then Searing Nightmare spam would give you the most value out of your mastery. You don't really have to worry about Vampiric Touch, especially because you're not going to be casting very many Void Bolts when you have a 5-pack like this. So you're not losing a ton by not having Vampiric Touch on everything. But because there is a boss coming up, I should probably save Power Infusion and Void Eruption, which means I should, I have 44 Insanity, so maybe Mind Sear into 1 Searing Nightmare, into Shadow Crash, and then Vampiric Touch everything, and then just Searing Nightmare spam. So let's see what I do. So I cast Shadow Mend on myself, and then I'm Vampiric Touching stuff, which is okay, but it means my damage is going to ramp slowly. I tried to learn my lesson there. Oh, and there's the Inspiring Mob, so it looks like I'm trying to focus this Inspiring Mob down. I tried to learn my lesson from the last guy, that bucking guy was going to knock me back, and so this is really bad positioning again by me and the tank. The tank and I line up right here, and then the tank runs right at me with this this guy who's doing the bucking thing. So I'm standing like right next to the tank. I'm like almost in the circle. I run away. The tank brings them towards me more. I get caught in this frontal, and then I get rooted. This is like many, many bad things in a row. I'm caught in another frontal right here. Um, this is like the worst positioning of any pull that you could have. I think I end up dying here actually. I might not, but I think I do. Now would be a great time for dispersion. It would break this root, and I have like 1k health left, so that would maybe keep me alive, but honestly I don't know how I survived this. So yeah, I get a pretty chunky heal from the healer, and then I immediately cast dispersion, and I'm getting the crap out of here because this tank has brought, and I don't mean to just say it's the tank's fault, because my position is solely my responsibility. So I should have just stood like maybe where this guy's standing. But yeah, this ends up really really bad. So I take a ton of damage. I'm doing 3.7k DPS, almost no damage. I've had several pulls like that where like the rogue is doing really well. He's doing 9.8k damage right here. He's managed to not have very many pulls where he almost dies by completely avoidable stuff like this. And you can tell in the overall. My overall is 5.8k right now. It's really hard to see with all this stuff in the way. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, the druid is doing 6.2. The rogue is at 6.1. I'm at 5.8. So I'm not doing way worse than the other two, but doing a lot worse than I could be doing in this situation. Imagine if I had not had to move from all this stuff and cast dispersion and have all this downtime where I'm not hitting anything. Imagine if I had just stood over here and been able to Mind Seer and Shadow Crash and everything to my heart's content. I would be doing more than 3.7k DPS. So that's one thing that ended up really bad for me. My positioning in this whole dungeon so far has been not the best. A Spirit Link goes down, which is honestly probably a panic Spirit Link because nobody was in it except for the tank. And I can understand because I almost died and the tank was really low, so maybe, the healer was like, oh crap, I better throw this down. But it didn't get much value, it doesn't seem. And so yeah, like right now, this is a really good position for me. Because the tank is over here, so if he's going to kite, he's going to probably kite that way. I'm 90 degrees of him, perpendicular. And I can just sit here and do damage. We do get a Prideful that spawns, so this is really an awkward situation where we want to kill this stuff as fast as possible so that we can focus on the Prideful. But it's all pretty close to dead, so it's not a huge deal. I get a 10k crit on my Shadow or Death right there, which chunks me pretty good. Yeah, and then this bucking rampage, I dodged that prideful thing, which is nice, but I don't think it would have hit me anyway. I used my Dark Thoughts proc during my Void Torrent, which is good. My Dreadfire Vessel, which I should probably have saved for the boss because it's a 2-minute cooldown and it does pretty good damage. It's like Mind Games, but on a 2-minute cooldown and does similar damage. And yeah, I'm just single targeting, get all 3 dots up, cast Shadow or Death when I'm not under 50% HP, and then yeah, we managed to kill the Prideful, and now we're moving into the boss. So with this boss, I've learned a couple things over the last couple weeks. Let's just watch for a bit. I'm gonna pop all my cooldowns. I need to dodge this, so I cancel my Void Torrent a little early. It's taking me a while to get into Void form here. Like right there, I cast like at least 10 spells before I even got into Void form. This is probably, actually, this is not just probably, this is bad. So I'm doing 7.5k DPS, right? If I had popped Void Eruption immediately, or early on, instead of going through all of these different spells a bunch of times and then popping it, I would have had 20% more spell damage just from being in Void form. And on top of that, I'd have access to Void Bolt, which is pretty good damage. And I would be able to hit the boss through basically my whole Void form. But I pop it right here, and the boss is right about to transition into the guessing game. So this is really bad by me. See, the guessing game goes out, and I still have like 11 seconds on my Void form, and I can't hit the boss. So now my Void form is used to just kill this guy, which is the right of the four, I guess, and it ends up really bad for me. So then I'm running Hungering Void, so I still have some time in Void form, but then yeah, it just like almost immediately drops. And there's like that was like a really bad use of my cooldowns right there. Um, so basically, yeah, we're back to single target stuff. Uh, these freeze tag guys, this is one of the things I meant when I mentioned I've learned a lot. These guys, if you like Dragon's Breath them or Psychic Horror them immediately, like when this cast isn't even started yet or is about to start, as soon as it spawns, if you hit them with a Dragon's Breath or a Psychic Horror, they won't do uh, their freezing thing when they run into people. So if I post any Mists of Tirna Scithe with our two fire mages with my main group, they love. There's one of the two mages, his name's Metaphor, loves to do that. They'll just run over, instantly Dragon's Breath it, and then we can completely ignore it. Although with a druid in the group, you can just, and even with fire mages, you could just, use one GCD to cast Entangling Roots on it, and then you can just ignore it, or you can Frost Nova it and just ignore it anyway. I dodge the dodgeball, and right here I'm targeting it so I can cast my Psychic Horror on it immediately. I Psychic Horror it right as the Entangling Roots goes off. Then yeah, I'm just back to focusing the boss. So I was gonna cast my Door of Shadows there because I didn't see that the roots were on it, and it was gonna run at me, and I wanted to get away from it, but it ended up not mattering, so I canceled my Door of Shadows. Here comes the next guessing game. Yeah, and throughout this whole boss fight, I'm still only doing 4.5k DPS, because I had a really bad uh, cooldown window, right? I didn't use my Void Eruption very well, which is showing in the damage meter, right? And beyond just looking bad because your damage is lower than everybody else, um, it is bad because it's going to take longer to kill the boss, right? Which means the timer is going to take longer. Everything's just going to take longer. So it's not just a vanity thing. You want to do good damage for the sake of killing stuff faster. That should be pretty obvious. Um, yeah, so then I'm just back to single target stuff. Right here, I get a pretty decent use of Void Eruption. I get to use it throughout most of this boss phase. Yeah, I get to use the whole thing actually through that. Uh, then we get into this next guessing game. If you have really good boss damage, okay, that's something I should mention. We could have killed this boss before this guessing game ever came out. If I had if I had used my Void Eruption there at the beginning, when I had my Power Infusion and I used it, and it got the whole value out of it before the first guessing game, then this guessing game would have never happened because the boss would be dead by now. The boss has like 100k HP, and that's easily made up if I do that. If I do my burst in the first cooldown window, if I do that correctly, the boss is dead. But instead, I didn't do it correctly, and now we have to do this guessing game, which means our time is going to go even longer, and that's just a really small thing that turns out to be a pretty big thing, because if we can skip this guessing game phase, right now we would be waiting for our P. Right now we're jumping off the edge, we're going on to the next thing, but instead we have to kill that guy and then kill this guy, and that's just not good. Um, little things like that can make the difference in timing a key and not timing a key. So in this case, we could have timed this +2, because Mists of Tirna Scithe is really forgiving and it's an easy key. But this guy says clean AF, but I think I did not play that clean AF. So yeah, a lot of little things like that. If everybody in your group misses a cooldown window like that, you don't time the key. And even on a really high key where the margins are so small, if you miss a cooldown window like that, that's game. You just can't time the key. This is one of the situations I would be worried about in a pug group. Having a target that needs to be kicked and you need to rotate kicks but not being able to talk about it is a problem. I hit everything. I popped all my cooldowns right here. Probably not the best move because we're about to go into a decently sized pack where I would potentially get more value out of my cooldowns. but it's not the worst move, I guess. It's good to use your cooldowns when you can. So uh, we're moving into this big pack, which is a good place to have my cooldowns, except these larvae are all going to die pretty quick. It's not a huge deal. It just means that I would be doing a lot more if I had power infusion here instead. So right there, this is another classic situation, like at the beginning, where our DH cast Arcane Torrent. So, okay, let me go back just a little bit so I can explain this better. The Staghorn will cast a shield on everything. I don't remember. It's called like stimulating or simulating uh, something. Let's see. It is called Stimulate Resistance. So when this cast goes off, everything is going to get a shield. And we get really, really unfortunate here because this cast is typically kickable, but these Reavers are patrolling by. This is just random, where the Reavers come this way sometimes and sometimes they go other ways. And this one is inspired. So this guy, which is typically kickable, is not kickable now because of this. And this will go off. Put a shield on everything. Something we could have done to avoid that is, I mean, that's like super random and kind of troll. So you don't necessarily have to plan for that. But if this was like MDI or something where it's really important that you get everything right perfectly, then yeah, there's no harm in pulling this back to this platform or even, you know, a little bit further than this because this is going to go off. Anyway, so, oh, it becomes kickable. So we could have kicked it because that guy got out of range. And both of these guys missed their kicks. So right here, I notice everything gets a shield on it, and I'm going to want to dispel it. I could use Arcane Torrent, because I'm probably close enough to at least get maybe these close ones, maybe not these ones in the back. But our tank is right on top of everything. So he Arcane Torrents almost immediately, and then I'm about to, my GCD is about to come up, so I cast Mass Dispel. But as my Mass Dispel was going off, I realized everything lost its shield, so I cancel that real quick and I start going back into my rotation. That's just a small little thing that I could have done better. Really, it's like we tank this stuff further away, we don't get that RNG, and this pack dies a lot quicker, but we get the really bad RNG and we tank it just a bit too close, and those guys both miss their kicks. If any of those things hadn't happened, that shield wouldn't have gone off and I wouldn't have had Massive Spell going, and then things would have been better, but it's just a slight thing, so not a huge deal. We got rid of the shields really quick as well, so it's like we barely lost anything. Just thought I'd mention it. So yeah, then I'm on single target duty on these guys, so Shadow Word deathing them as they die. Try and get more insanity for the next pack. The Reavers come by again. And our tank calls for a Shroud here. This ends up going really kind of wonky, but not too bad. Our tank wants to take this path, and our Rogue, who's right here that you can barely see, wants to take this path. And like neither of them is willing to budge. This is something that would be easily avoidable if we were in Discord or whatever. So as you can see, this tank is like, come here, come here, come here, come here. The Rogue just goes, nope. And so we take this path. They manage to stay inside the Shroud, so it's not a big deal. And then we run past that first pack, and we run past the second pack. And then we're going to pull this pack anyway. So it turns out to not be a huge deal, but just a little miscommunication. Right there, I threw out my Shadow Crash before I had anything on anything. That was a bad move. I should have just come down here. I also popped Power Infusion. This is also a bad move. So after this pack, we're going to be going into the boss. Actually, this pack is going to proc Prideful, so it's not as bad of a move to pop Power Infusion here, because we're going to have to, it's going to be on cooldown while we're fighting Prideful instead of immediately on the boss. So it's less bad, but still, this is just bad all around by me. I throw out my Shadow Crash without having dots on anything. Don't do that. It's typically bad. I jumped down here, popped Power Infusion immediately because I was like, ooh, I want to pad on this fight really hard. I cast Mind Seer and I'm spamming Searing Nightmare on stuff. And let's see how it works out for me. I also pop Void Eruption. I figure, honestly, I'm probably like, well, obviously I'm making bad decisions right now because I already popped Power Infusion. it's probably, if I had noticed, if I had thought ahead, oh, this is going to proc Prideful, and then we're going to be fighting the boss, then I wouldn't have popped Power Infusion. And even if I had popped Power Infusion and then realized that, I would have held Void Eruption. But I didn't realize either of those things, and I'm just padding this fight like crazy. It's a waste of both cooldowns. Put Vampiric Touch on everything, but one last thing. Because I have popped both of my cooldowns, I may as well do as much damage as possible. So, no use beating myself up over it in the moment. Gotta put Vampiric Touch on everything and just start blasting. So, just Searing Nightmare spam, basically. There's 4 targets, so it's good to use Void Bolt occasionally. Probably more than I do. I end up doing like 10k DPS, so okay, but a bad use of my cooldowns, like I said before, so not good. Okay, so now we're going into the Manifestation of Pride. That is like one of the craziest SLTs I've ever seen. What is the point of that? I have no idea. So we go into this Manifestation of Pride. I walk into the SLT because that's a habit that I have tried to build into muscle memory. Anytime I see that ring, I'm not the healer, so it's not my choice to say, is that a bad shadow? Not shadow. Is that a bad Spirit Link totem? Even if the answer is yes, I'm gonna get in it. So the thing goes down, I run into it. Doesn't matter when it is. Just a good thing to try and keep in mind. My healer, I'm assuming, most of the time knows better than me. So, I mean, it's literally their job to heal, so if they think it's okay to use it, I'm getting in it. That's I think, especially in coordinated groups, that's something that you should try to do, is um, build muscle memory for situations like that. Boom, SLT, I run right into it. Doesn't matter what I'm doing. My health is everybody's health now. So, okay, so now we're moving into the boss. It'd be really nice to have both my cooldowns right here. We pop Lust, I could be doing 12k, 13k DPS, 14k. Instead, I'm doing 8k, which means this boss is going to take longer, and make our key take longer, and we're not going to 2-chest. And honestly, if I had not messed up my cooldowns for this boss or the boss before this one, it's likely we 2-chest this key. Even if I had not messed up my cooldowns on this boss, we still could potentially 2-chest this key. We need to get about 20% more trash. We have 2.5 minutes to kill this boss and get 20% more trash. If I had Power Infusion and Vampiric or Void Eruption going, I wouldn't be doing 8k, I'd be doing 10k plus, which would mean this boss is going to die quicker and we may make the timer. But instead, I didn't do that, and this turns out pretty bad. I also, one more thing before I let this play, sorry, I know this is probably really annoying. My Void Eruption is on 12-second cooldown, and here, let me move my mouse real quick so that this bar goes away. Oh, it won't. Okay, so I have 12 seconds, I'll just tell you. I have 12 seconds on my Void Eruption right here before it's off cooldown, and I have 36 seconds on my Power Infusion. This means that I should probably wait, you can see right now, I should probably wait for Power Infusion before I pop Void Eruption, but instead I'm making a bad choice, and I pop Void Eruption here without Power Infusion, and then in 20 seconds from now, Power Infusion will come up, and I won't get very much value out of it. It's kind of okay, because I have Lust going, and because of, I mean, Lust is more than Power Infusion, so Void Eruption during Lust is better than Void Eruption during Power Infusion, so it's not the worst choice. But honestly, this cooldown window was just so bad, and I should have lined it up better, thought more about the route. So yeah, so right here, I wasn't kicking that consumption because the consumption does nothing until the very end of the cast. And while he's channeling consumption, he's not doing other more deadly things. So typically you want to let him channel consumption. You want to break the shield as fast as possible, and then ignore him basically until the cast is about to finish, and then you kick him. The rogue ended up kicking him when he still had like 8 seconds left. So this fight is going to be 8 seconds harder than if we had not kicked consumption, because he's going to start casting other crap, right? That's more deadly, like these larva dudes and mind link and the other thing we have to kick and all the stuff that flies out of him, like this stuff. Actually, that's consumption. So um, yeah, so that's something could have done better there. He does the acid expulsion, easy to dodge. Although, as you'll see in a second, I don't end up dodging every single one of these. Okay, one more thing I should mention. I'm on the top of the damage meter right here, right? Which typically is a sign that you're doing stuff correctly, right? I'm beating everybody else in damage. Yay, go me. This is not good. My damage right now is bad. I've said it before. My cooldown window got lined up badly, so don't let this fool you. Me doing 7.9k damage here is low. It should be 9.5 plus, but instead it's not even 8k. So cast Void Torrent. My Shadow Crash before I put Devouring Plague. A very micro thing would be, oh, this is where I die. So before I talk about this, the Shadow Crash that I put out like 2 seconds before this, right, Void Torrent right there, the Shadow Crash. I have 100 insanity, which means I can afford a Devouring Plague. If I had just held that Shadow Crash for 1 GCD, I used Devouring Plague there instead, and then popped Shadow Crash here, I would do 9% more damage, right? Small thing, but a micro improvement that would, over the course of a dungeon, be better. So my Shadow Crash did 5k damage there. If I had 9% more, it would have done, what's 9% more of that, like almost 6k, something like that. So right here, I am in a really bad position. Typically on this boss, you want to stay as far from melee as you can, because these green circles get really hard to see when everybody's all stacked on top of each other in here. And because of that, this effect kind of gets in the way, and I don't really see this swirly. And this swirly needs to be dodged, and there could be swirlies coming from behind this green stuff that I can't see. So I end up getting clipped by this one, and I die. Actually, what happened was I got hit by that one, and I backed into this puddle. So the one that hits me doesn't immediately kill me. It does 28k damage right there. And then backing into the other puddle does 8k damage, and I die. So now I'm dead, and I'm doing 0 DPS, which is worse than even 8k. So I take the B-res immediately just to try and... That is like one of the worst things I've ever seen myself do. Let me try and clarify. I took that B-res immediately so that we could, kill the boss as fast as possible. Basically always, unless the boss is doing something really deadly, and you can wait out the mechanic, you typically want to just take the B-res instantly. And then after the B-res, I just walked directly over one of these green puddles. So if you watch, I take the B-res, I put on my shadow form immediately, I jumped into that puddle, which cut me down a little bit. I'll give myself some slack on that one because it was hard to see with my camera angle and then everything. I just jumped and, okay, maybe I step in a puddle one time, not such a big deal. But then right here, there is no excuse for this. I can see this puddle clearly. I mean, it is darker than these other puddles, so it's not great, but I just run straight across it. Just right there. Just walk right across it, take a ton of damage. Completely avoidable. If I had just gone whoop, right around the side, I avoid that. I'm dodging all this consumption stuff. My damage is looking horrible. I don't have my dots up on this guy. That Mind Games and this Void Torrent are like really bad. I only have Shadow Word Pain on the boss right now, so that Mind Games wasn't very good. And then that Void Torrent also was bad for 2 reasons. First, the Shadow Word Pain being my only dot on the boss. Then secondly, because this acid expulsion thing was about to come out. So I stood there channeling when I knew I was going to have to move. And this is another one of those things where in the moment I wasn't thinking ahead, right? So I end up canceling my Void Torrent a little bit early. Oh look, it seems that I canceled it like 2/3 of the way into the cast. So, not good. I do manage to dodge all those green things though, that's good. And then I still need to put Vampiric Touch on this guy. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I break the Mind Link. I Mind Blast. Probably gonna Devouring Plague. Yep. Still no Vampiric Touch. Uh, Still no Vampiric Touch. I step back into a puddle. I've got Mind Link on me again. So I need to make room away from people. Luckily, right here, I was standing far enough away that the Mind Link hits me and it doesn't connect to anybody because everybody's far away. But also, this is bad positioning. We have a Resto Shaman as our healer, and Resto Shamans tend to like people to stand close to each other so that Chain Heal can hit multiple people. And I'm not even in range of any of these people. So right here, I'm like on an island. If I take any damage here, I can't get healed by anybody but myself. So this boss fight has gone just horribly for me. I didn't dodge the green stuff. I stepped in green stuff all the time. I'm not keeping my dots up. My Vampiric Touch has been down for like 10 seconds or something. And it's not looking good. I cast my instant cast Mind Blast there. I pop Void Eruption, which gives me, all my mastery, which is good, and access to Void Bolt, which is also good. I give these green swirls a pretty wide girth, which is good. And then, is it Birth or Girth? I'm not sure. And then I get Mind Link on there again. One thing I'll mention there that's pretty nifty and was good. When these guys came out, they were all targeting me. And then I faded, and they targeted someone else. Apparently, these guys are based on threat. And that works every time. So I had, I guess, the most threat, or I was randomly targeted, so I immediately had the most threat on these guys. And I faded, and they immediately switched to, it looks like, our healer. Usually the healer pulls aggro on these dudes anyway, so you might not have to fade, but especially with the one that spawned so close to me, fading there was the right choice, I think. We get this Mind Link, I run away, right as these guys come out, this guy's targeting me, I'm healing McHeals. And so as I'm breaking this Mind Link, I pop Fade, and that guy retargets the other dude and runs away, and I can run back in and start hitting the boss again. It's good to hit those larvae so that whoever they're targeting can run away, and I throw a Shadow Crash on them there at the end. But it's kind of hard. You don't really want to Searing Nightmare them unless people are going to keep them like right in the middle like that. But you know. So we end up killing this boss, and at the end of this boss fight took a minute and a half. It just disappeared, but it was at 1:30 almost exactly. Our rogue did 5.6, our druid did 5.2, and I did 4.7k damage. That was a really bad boss fight for me. That could have taken a minute instead of a minute and a half, and then we would have been at 46 seconds left on the timer instead of 16. So, and I mean for the 2 chest. So, not good, but like I said before, Mists of Tirna Scithe is like a really easy key that's not very punishing if you do things wrong. So right here, I'm gonna single target this larva guy pretty hard. He's only got 46k HP, so you don't need too much. And that's a situation where this Staghorn cast pretty quick into pulling these guys, less than 10 seconds into the pull, and he was casting the shield. If we hadn't focused that larva, like our rogue is doing 9.7k, our DH is doing 6k, I'm also doing 6k. If we hadn't blown up that larva, that shield could have gotten off, which makes this pull take longer, etc, etc. But we killed it really quick, kicked the cast, I kicked it, it looks like, and now we don't have to worry about the shield, even though we have 2 Arcane Torrents, which could have helped with it. But anyway, so then we keep moving on. I Void Torrent into this guy for some reason. Probably not the best choice. And then I'm sniping these larvae with Shadow Word Death. A small improvement I could have there was, I'll go back a little bit so you can watch. I tab target through everything, and because I'm tab targeting, sometimes I'll target a larva and then one of these guys who is not killable immediately, and then I have to press tab again before I target the right larva. If I had just clicked it with my mouse, I skip a button press, right? That's a small but easy thing to do. Let me go back just a little bit so you can watch. So as you can see, these larvae are dying. I'm going to Shadow Word Death them, so I click on one, I Shadow Word Death it, and then I tab target another one, tab target 3 times right there to get to the third one, and then I miss that last one. So that if I had just done that with my mouse, that would have been a lot easier and better. this shield goes off for some reason. I have no idea how. We had 4 kicks available. That's just one thing that being in voice chat would help with, and I don't want to just rag on these random guys I'm playing with. So um, we should have kicked that. Didn't end up mattering too much. But. So then we move into this next pack. A Staghorn. He's going to be my priority target, but not a huge deal. I'm going to pop VE here, Void Eruption, I mean, and Power Infusion, and then just spam Searing Nightmare. This is a situation where I'll probably do some pretty big damage. We need to kick that regeneration as quick as possible. I notice everybody else's kicks are on cooldown, so then I kick it myself. You typically want to hold your kick because it's a 45-second cooldown. So you want to hold it for like the really important stuff when everybody else's kicks are on cooldown. And then yeah, we just end up finishing this pack. I get a really bad Void Torrent there. Should have just saved it for this next pack probably, especially because this is the end of the key. I'm going to put Vampiric Touch on everything. I'm standing a little too far away. I should walk a little bit closer than this so that I'm not having troubles with range, especially if people run away. Another shield goes off. None of the people kicked it. I end up mass dispelling that one, and then we kick this regeneration. I'm spamming Searing Nightmare because there's 4 targets. I pop my Void Torrent. The Spirit Link goes down, so I should be running into this. I get in eventually, and then this is the end of the key. We just finished these 3 dudes, and that'll be it. Okay, so final thoughts about this key. Oh, and the last thing I should say is, that Manifestation of Pride will spawn after you hit 100, but the key ends, so you don't actually have to kill this Manifestation of Pride that's spawning right now. This red thing is coming from him, and it doesn't matter. He'll just spawn and sit there, so that's a cool little trick you can do at the end of a dungeon, is finish your trash after you finish all the bosses, and then you get to skip a Prideful, if you don't need the Prideful for the boss. So yeah, so that's the end of the key. Final thoughts on the key. There were a couple really, really important times that I messed up my DPS cooldowns big time. I was the only death, so it was pretty clean death-wise. Nobody really died except for me. Well, nobody died except for me. My death was entirely avoidable had I just worked on my positioning, paid more attention. We missed the 2 chests by 2 minutes. That's probably could have been made up had I lined up my cooldowns better. My overall damage, it's hard to see right here, but it's 5.3k, which is good-ish. For a Mists of Tirna Scithe, it could be higher. Obviously, it could be higher because my cooldowns were really wonky. And it's significantly less than the other 2 DPS. The Rogue did 5.9k, which is pretty big, and the Druid did 5.7k. So I'm almost, I'm like 600 DPS less than the Rogue, and I don't know how geared the Rogue is, but I'm like really geared. I'm 216 item level. Actually, I think it's 217. I should be doing more than 5.3k damage in a 15 mists, so I need to line up my cooldowns better. And then outside of that, I think I played this pretty well. Yeah, so I mean, if you have any feedback or comments or anything about how I played this and what you think I could have done better, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll respond and tell you what I think. And yeah, other than that, if anybody made it this far into the video, thanks for sticking around. I hope that at least some of what I said was insightful. I'm not sure how many of these I'll do. This just felt like a good one because there were some pretty key things that I felt like I could point out. If people like this video, maybe I'll do more of these, but it right now it's at like 1 hour and 9 minutes, so maybe this is too long of a video. But like I said before, if you enjoyed it or have feedback or whatever, let me know, and I'll act accordingly. So the other thing I want to say is, if you have like any small questions that a lot of people ask, I know this is kind of this might come off the wrong way, but I have a Discord server where it's a lot easier for me to talk to people in there than it is to like reply to YouTube comments. So if you have questions like, what talents should I run in this dungeon, or can I get your LVUI profile, or anything like that, I'm willing to share pretty much all knowledge that I have about this game. I'll share all of my UI. I'll go I'll talk in depth with you about, the intricacies of Shadow Priest or whatever, but it's really hard for me to do it in the YouTube comments. So the link to my Discord is in the description of this video and every other dungeon video I've put out so far. So if you just join that, feel free to talk in basically any of the channels. Just try not to, ping a bunch of people and make them mad at you, but I'll gladly talk to you guys in there and, go in depth or whatever. So other than that, I think that's it for the video. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you later. Peace.